Great. And are we live with the attendees right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about the technical delays. There's always technical delays in technology. But anyway, hello and welcome to the inaugural educational event from the Florida Center for EMS. We are delighted to have you with us as we introduce our innovative education platform through a special webinar. This webinar featuring our distinguished guest and incredible lineup of panelists that we have. Before I introduce the guest speaker and the panelists, let me outline what you can anticipate today's session. First, you're going to hear a really captivating narrative from our guest speaker about the pioneers of who was a pioneer in paramedicine in the United States. Following the presentation or during the presentation, we can have an open dialogue and conversation. So feel free to ask any questions. Just like Dr. Jamison said, raise your hand and then we can unmute you and you can have that dialogue with the presenter or the panelist. And lastly, after the webinar concludes, if you can please fill out the survey, that way you can get your CEUs for this session. So let me introduce our panelists. First, we have Anisha Parks. If you want to raise your hand, Anisha Parks. She's been in EMS since 2019. She worked at Sunstar Paramedics and currently with the city of Dunedin as a firefighter paramedic. She's a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and is native to the Tampa Bay area. Welcome, Anisha. Next, we have Tyrone Edwards. He's a 21-year EMS veteran, a lieutenant with Marion County Fire Rescue, an EMS instructor, and the lead paramedic for the Marion County's Community Paramedicine Program. Raise your hand, Tyrone, say hello. And behind Tyrone, we have Gerald Turner. He's the EMS captain assigned to the training division with Marion County Fire Rescue. And he's been in EMS for 12 years and total with Marion County for 10. If you can wave hi, Gerald. And then next we have Dr. Jamison. He is the current medical director for the state of Florida. Dr. Jamison is a longtime strong supporter of medical special operations community and a member of NAEMT. He also serves as the medical director at Pinellas County EMS. Fun fact, he was a volunteer firefighter and he also started as an EMT for Sunstar Paramedics back in the day. And then I am Dr. Penny Eggers. I started my career with the city of Tampa as a public safety telecommunicator, then transferred into becoming a firefighter paramedic with the city of Dunedin, go Dunedin. Retired there before getting into education. I'm now the Director of Education for the Florida Center of EMS and Assistant Professor for the University of Florida. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our guest speaker. And if you don't know about the Freedom House story, you should. Before Seattle, and yes, even before Squad 51, the Freedom House was providing cutting-edge care to the citizens of the Hill and the greater Pittsburgh in a world where they were not regarded as equals in emergency care or health care. We're truly honored to have Chief John Moon with us today as a trailblazer in EMS field and a testament to the spirit of innovation. His contributions as one of America's first paramedics with the Freedom House Ambulance Service are not only part of history, but a model for the future of emergency medical services. The story of the Freedom House is a powerful example of how visionary leaders and unwavering dedication can transform emergency care. Before other renowned EMS programs emerged, Freedom House broke barriers and delivered advanced medical services to the Hill District and greater Pittsburgh. This community faced significant challenges in accessing equitable health care. Working alongside pioneers like Dr. Saffer and Nancy Caroline, Freedom House demonstrated timely EMS innovations were crucial for improving patient care, which aligns with the Florida Center for EMS. We have three pillars for ourselves. We have innovation, EMS, and education. And I felt that a way to launch our educational program was to look at how our past and our innovations of the past and the shoulders of the giants that we stand on today in order for us to improve EMS for the future. So without any more introductions. Chief John Moon, if you want to take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Eggers. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you all today, and to really begin with, I just can't thank you all enough for this opportunity, because you're helping me fulfill the desires of my heart, and it's to get a part of EMS, or the history of EMS as you see it today, back out into the forefront where it belongs, because this part of history has been dormant or swept under the rug, if you will, for well over 50 plus years. So once I retired as the Assistant Chief of Pittsburgh Emergency Medical Services after 34 years, I kind of went on this personal mission. And it was to bring this part of history that basically very few people had known about, including people that work for the city of Pittsburgh, back into the forefront, back into this part of history where I feel very strongly that it belongs. But in order for you to get the concept or to feel what it was like, I'm going to have to take you back on a little journey. And we're going to go back a couple of years, back into the early 60s. If any of you all can remember during that time, probably a lot of you weren't even born then, but it was during a turbulent period during the civil rights era in the early 60s. And I'm going to take you to a neighborhood which I grew up in the city of Pittsburgh, that was somewhat neglected and underserved. And it was a type of predominantly Black neighborhood where housing was a problem, jobs were a problem, and the community leaders, the politicians, really kind of turned their backs on this particular community. And what I want to point out to you is, despite the challenges that we all faced, the community itself decided to tackle one of its main problems, and it was healthcare. We had people that had doctor's appointments and couldn't get transportation to their doctor's appointments. Cabs would not come into this community. If you can imagine, the only option that we had at that time to get to the emergency room was in the back of a police wagon. And if you can picture a police wagon pulling up to your front door, and two officers getting out, 99% of the time they were white males, because there was no such thing as diversity and inclusion and equity during that time frame. And these gentlemen would perhaps come to your door and more than likely walk you and place you into the back of this police wagon on a canvas cot. And both officers would get up front, and away you would go to the emergency room. Now, the problem with that is, if something happened to you in the back of that vehicle, you stopped breathing or your heart stopped beating, there was no one back there to help you. So oftentimes when you arrived at the emergency room, you were more than likely worse off than when they came to get you. So we're going to fast forward right now to a couple of months, still in the 60s. The federal government decided to bundle money into cities, not only in Pittsburgh, but across the country, to try to combat racism. And Pittsburgh was one of the communities itself that was fighting that challenge. So as a result of that, a organization was founded by the name of Freedom House, by a gentleman by the name of Jim McCoy. And this community organization, ironically, were primarily concerned about job training and job placement and voter registration. There was even a little mini food bank in this organization. So this organization supplied job training to the community, voter registration, job placements, and delivered food to the residents of the Hill District. And one of the board of directors came up with this concept. He said, if this organization can deliver food to the residents of this underserved, somewhat neglected community, why can't they deliver medical care? So if you can remember, we only had to rely on the police to get back and forth, and they made the decision on whether they wanted to come or not, when they wanted to get there, or how they wanted whether they wanted to transport you or not. So we were at their mercy. So this gentleman by the name of Phil Hallen, who's roughly about 95 years old today, he's a very good friend of mine. He came up with the idea that if this community can deliver food, why can't they deliver medical care? But he didn't know how to get that concept into operation. So what he did is he approached the local hospital, which was Presbyterian University Hospital now, which is UPMC, and he was put in touch with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Peter Saffer. Now, Dr. Saffer himself was a visionary. He was an innovator. It was his vision to prove to the world that it wasn't how fast you got that person to the emergency room that determined the outcome, but what was being done for them before they got there. But no one would believe it. It just fell on deaf ears. So if you can imagine, if you will, up comes this organization who meets with Dr. Saffer saying, we want to increase the survival rate in our community. We want to upgrade the medical transport. We got residents that can't get the doctor's appointments. No cabs will come and get them. And so what do we need to do? And he looked at this organization and said, this is the perfect example for me to get my vision out to the world. And in doing that, basically, I can help this community. So the community itself agreed to allow him to train the personnel. And there was one requirement that Dr. Saffer had to agree upon, that every member he put into this class had to be Black. And he agreed to that. So Dr. Saffer takes 25 Black males who, by society standards, myself included, were the least likely to succeed. Society's throwaways, if you will. We were labeled hardcore employables, which simply meant that nobody would hire you. So he takes this group of individuals and placed them in a training program that was the most intense training program that ever been done anywhere in this country. And I don't mean as observers. We spent time in the intensive care units, actually treating patients, time in the operating room, studying intubation and starting IVs, spent time with the coronary care unit, going over EKGs, in the obstetrics ward, assisting in the delivery of infants. So we take all of this training and we are put out on the street, but in the back of a police wagon. So that in itself presented its own set of problems because you couldn't really do any treatment back there. So Dr. Saffer, along with this organization, redesigned the modern day ambulance. We raised the head of the vehicle itself. That blood pressure cuff and that suction unit, that onboard oxygen unit that you see on the side of the head of the patient on the side of the wall, we designed that. The seat at the head of the patient that every ambulance is required to have today, we designed that along with Dr. Saffer at Freedom House. So we take that vehicle that we redesigned and we put individuals on it and we place them into the community. Now that sounds great in a sense, but there was a couple of issues, there was a couple of challenges that we had to overcome.